not the coolest kid and the girl, and then the handsome guy comes in, and then they race, and then he wins, and then they're, you know, like it's
ends up in a very slow car chase and lots of explosions.
The funny thing was, I did another one where it was like a soldier needs to get to Kandahar by midnight, and it just wrote this thing, and then I took pieces out of it and put it into Midjourney, and it made these great storyboards. I was like, we need to do a YouTube channel of just doing shorts written by Chat GPT. Would be funny. Come right back.
If they get the Chat GPT to join the Writers Guild, you know, the Writers Guild could make a fortune off the dues alone for each.
Hello and welcome to Office Hours. If you're just joining us, Well, you might be three years late. We have 3 years of office hours today. We're not going to make too big of a splash about it, but if you'd like to comment on it, feel free to put your questions into the chat. Our second hour, though, we will be focusing on education questions and a little bit of a look back at our history in education. So feel free to put your education questions for our second hour. Feel free to put in your questions at officehours.global if you'd like to join the party. So let's get started. TJ, what do we have?
Thank you, Josh. Vienna Tran from Adelaide, Australia is up first today. Vienna says, "Happy third birthday, Alex, and Office Hours. Here's to many more years of learning and friendship. What is your advice for those who still want to be part of the community but find it challenging to join the panel due to time zones or work commitments?"
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, if you are able to listen live, if the time zone isn't such a problem that you can't be awake at the time, Mukana Mobile is a good way that I like. When I can't be on the panel, I usually crank open Mukana Mobile because I can listen to it on the go. It has the audio feed, and if I want to enter questions or respond in the panel chat, you can do that, which is great if you're on a commute, except if you're driving. So that's my suggestion.
John?
Remember that there's also opportunities to be part of the community through Discord, especially, I think, is the primary asynchronous way, as well as after hours. So you can always jump onto after hours and have a conversation with somebody else who's part of the office hours community. As far as volunteering opportunities, there are other roles you can take on that don't have to be in line with the show times. And make sure you sign up through the I want to help link on the email.
Alex?
Yeah, you're going to find that there are more and more basically non-synchronous opportunities. So research for the second hours, building out a lot of those bits and pieces, working with teams on that, and we'll start to have more and more meetings related to that. We are having a volunteer meeting next Saturday. So if you're interested in doing that and talking about some of those those asynchronous opportunities, definitely come to next Saturday. That'll be happening after this meeting, and we'll talk more about those opportunities.
Fantastic.
We'd love to have Vienna
advice
on Teams. That's all I want to say. Vienna, we'd love to have you on a team. So let's find a place for you to join.
Absolutely. So some worldwide accommodating features of being able to participate in our community. Also, our questions open up every day after our show, so you can put in your questions anytime you want. You don't have to put them in just before the show, but if you'd like to join us, just another reminder to put in your questions and vote. Let's go to our next question.
Andy Carluccio from San Francisco, California is up next. Yesterday, Zoom opened its platform to Amazon Web Services for developers to create custom cloud-based applications and workflows with Zoom raw data. What future products would this community purchase from developers utilizing this new platform?
John?
Yeah, I'm from the call center industry, and Zoom has a call center platform. So I think a lot of those integrations are going to be tools that allow you to do things like sentiment analysis on calls that happen within Zoom, as well as identifying who's speaking when, what words they're using, trends you see, and those kinds of patterns. So I think in the call center space, there will be quite a few different applications that will integrate, because call centers, a lot of them have unique applications, and they need their platform to integrate with those applications.
Alex?
Yeah, from the link that was out there in the Zoom blog, I wasn't totally clear of all the features that would and wouldn't be available. It looked like it might be audio, data, video, but if it's video, I think that there are a lot of tools. I think that there's a bigger opportunity for Zoom to empower people building bespoke events, in the cloud for all kinds of things, everything from school to meetings to corporate to everything else that you can think of. And right now, it's just been a little bit heavy to do that. And you're trying to cobble things together and make things work. So I think that building, giving people the tools that they need via the SDK take something that people know a lot about, which is AWS, and start to piece those things together, I think really makes a big difference. And so I think I think it's going to be an explosion of being able to build these bespoke solutions. And I think that a lot of the things that we see from Mimo, from Isadora, all those things could potentially be passed, could be feeders from the real life world into the cloud to make all of those things work.
Next question.
Bo Cordell from Charleston, South Carolina asks, this week on Reddit, I noticed a free and open source rundown timing alternative to Stage Timer and Shoflo called OnTime. It's cross-platform and browser-based. Has anyone had a chance to play with it? And there's a link.
Go ahead, Alex.
I haven't played with it. I think Shoflo is something that we've used in the past, and it's been really effective for exactly what it's designed for. So if you use it for a live event, it works exceptionally well. When we use it for broadcast, it's not been perfect in that area, especially if we do long broadcasts with it. So I think that it'll be interesting to play with this new one OnTime. I'm always concerned, I admit, with open source projects because I'm just not sure they're going to get the resources that they need. So as someone building a project, I oftentimes look at an open source project and go, well, we'll see. so it's, because I'm usually happy to pay for things because I want them to be stable and keep growing and know that I'm investing something too, which is time. And so time and stability are a big deal to me. So, the open source projects always worry me, but I'm definitely going to check this one out either way.
Jeffrey, get a chance to check it out?
Well, I was going to show it off, but vMix decided not to show off the other screens, so I got to fix that first. But yeah, I did download it and install it. It runs fairly well, straightforward, no major issues there.
Fantastic. Let's go to our next question.
Andy Carluccio from San Francisco, California. OBSBOT has opened an OSC-based API for its webcams. Will this be the pressure needed to get Insta360 to open its APIs for the link beyond basic UVC control? Does this update change anyone's perception of the value of the OBSBOT cameras?
Jeffrey?
Yeah, absolutely. So what they've done is they've created this thing called the UVC remote, and they've with OBSBOT you can actually get an actual remote, and I have one down in the basement. I should have grabbed it. That was USB pluggable, and then you plug it in, and of course you can control up to 3 different OBSBOTs there. With this OSC update, you could actually add that to things like vMix, and I have a quick demo here. Here's what it looks like outside. Yes, I did shovel this morning, and through my vMix, I can actually control the movement. I can switch cameras and a lot more. Plus, with my Stream Deck, I also there is a downloadable OBSBOT option where you can then be able to zoom in, zoom out, and control your camera left and right. So it's a pretty good, big game changer. And when I last talked to OBSBOT, they wanted to do a lot more. They wanted to actually put NDI in there. And I'm really expecting that this Tiny 2 will have functionality where all of a sudden you're going to be using this with your bit focus and your Stream Deck easily.
Alex?
Yeah, I think that the OSC is a big deal. We'll see what we can get there. It looks like it's in pre-order right now for the new Tiny 2, which is the one that is probably the closest to the Insta360. I think that you will see us start pushing next week for all of us to contact Insta360 and point out the fact that OBSBOT, we're trying to make decisions about cameras, and OBSBOT has an OSC support, and we're wondering what they're going to do with it. So we're going to see, this will be our first kind of test of mobilizing our group for this. So stay tuned for that. We'll be putting it out next week. We'll probably talk about it all next week and put it in the email of some basic things we want people to do. And we'll see if a lot of people, if even 30 or 40 people show up on a website asking for something, it probably will at least get a meeting, internally about what's going on there. So I think that we'll start to push that a little harder next week. So stay tuned.
Next question.
Brant Whitehead from Adelaide, Australia. For someone building a large pool house, what cables should we get in the trenches connecting to the main house?
Nigel.
So I actually asked someone the question this week about what cabling we would recommend, and their answer is always it depends how flexible you want and how much money you want to spend. If you're really just delivering a TV signal, then the coax is fine. If you're just delivering sound, then you can just send speaker wires. If you want more flexibility, send a Cat 6 or Cat 7. And if you really want to do this properly and you really don't know what you want to do in the other end, multimodal OM3 fiber will give you the maximum flexibility to change your mind later.
Alex?
The biggest thing that I would say is that if I'm building a trench, I would build it in a way that I could keep on adding things to it. So I while they're, we want to, the big problem we get into, and it's amazing when we go into a house or a building where they thought of that, where they built the pipeline and they built the things that are needed. So one thing that we see in some locations is either some kind of cable or string that runs along the entire thing that you simply attach to it, and then you just roll that cable through, and you can just pull new cables through that at any time you want. So you're not trying to feed something through, you're not trying to work it out. There's actually a service cable that's built into the system that allows you to pull things along. And so those are the kind of things that we like to see if we can, through those systems. And so think about forward flexibility in that area. For me, I would probably, we have a lot of trouble with multi-mode. I think that it does work inside of what the use case that Nigel's pointing out. I would put probably a TAC 12, to start, across there, because I can single mode where I have 12 strands of fiber. I can go 6 ways each, 6 each way if I want to, or 8 one and 4 the other. For some video solutions, multi-mode is very problematic. That's why we tend to work away from that. But I'd start with a TAC 12 to get if you're talking about, I assume because you're talking to this show, you're not talking about all the other things that you could put there, like 200 amps of power.
TJ.
Like Alice said, forward thinking, add an empty conduit in the trench just for future things that you don't know about yet.
Next question.
Guy Cochran from Seattle, Washington wants to know, how has Chat GPT helped you?
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I usually use Chat GPT for whenever I've had large text I needed to generate, like something more than a paragraph. I've typically just been using Chat GPT to give me an idea of what to start on. Sometimes I'll ask it for an outline. Sometimes I'll ask it to write the entire thing. But what I've done is I created a prompt that writes in my voice. And so it always kind of sounds like me, and then I can take it from there to edit.
Go ahead, Alex. Yeah. So on top of just a lot of entertainment, I find that I've talked about it a lot. I have it write recipes for me, and what's really funny about the recipes is that I can say, well, I really want this. I'm really into Osh soup, so I really want this Osh soup. I want it to be authentic. And then it gives it to me and said, but I want 12 quarts of it because I want it all week. So it gives me another one. I don't want any pasta, so it takes that out. And the thing is you can't do that with a regular recipe. You're like doing all this calculation, trying to figure out, okay, well, how do I do the multiplier, and does this multiply right, and what are the values? And you just tell it what you want, and you don't. And then the other thing that I've had it do is I asked it yesterday. We were talking before the show about writing a script. I said, write me a script of my daughter came up with 2 teenage snails, a rom-com, and it wrote a little script. That was the most absolute rom-com ever connected to snails. So anyway, so I think that it's a lot of entertainment for me right now. I have had it for testing write code, and I will say that I haven't turned it into an app. I wanted an app that forced my phone to always stay in 48 megapixel. And so I just said, write this, and write it in the language of Swift. I sent it to someone who would know, and they said, yeah, that will absolutely work. So I haven't packaged it into an app yet, but it was amazing that in 15 seconds, I had a little applet that did what I wanted to do. And that's one of the things that I think a lot of folks that I'm working with are using it for, is getting snippets of code, not usually the whole thing. And they say that usually, and like the stuff that I've had, it's not completely accurate. The other thing that I've been doing is just having explained things. I talked about it earlier this week. I had it explain the blockchain to my daughter. It was a better description than I would have ever come up. I said, explain blockchain as if I'm an 11-year-old. My daughter's a little older, but I just thought it would be funny to see 11-year-old. And it started with a school metaphor. Like, this is you have a digital notepad, and you write it down. So if people have lunch money or they have other things, it keeps track of it inside of this ledger. And it just explained the whole thing in school terms, and then broke it down into a more technical thing. And I vetted it with John to make sure that it was accurate, and it nailed it. And so just having it explain things to me is been something I probably use it the most for. And then I go Google things and continue to research it, from other people. But it's not accurate, but when you Google, you have to realize that most of that isn't accurate either. so like we overestimate what we're reading.
John Preto.
If you're in a business that uses language, that means you need ChatGPT. We're seeing significant improvements from 3.5 to 4. So we're using it for everything. We're developers, and so we're feeding it into our application as well. The funnest thing I've done over the last week is we have a exam for rocketry. It's called level 2, and I had it take our exam, and it got an 87, so it didn't pass by 1 point. Darn it.
Courtney?
I get a lot of high-tech equipment directly from China. And reading the instruction manuals on things like this little USB meter or little oscilloscopes and stuff that have been translated by machine from Chinese into English, which is almost incomprehensible in its original format. I just copy that text in the Chinese English translation and paste it into Chat GPT, and it fixes everything. It makes it perfectly readable and easily understandable, which is very difficult to do.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So, of course, I have a website, and every year I pretty much go through the possibility that of what Geekazine is doing. Does it really need a website anymore? And one of the biggest problems is always writing articles. So writing articles and starting, because I don't need it to write the article. I just need it to write a structure around it, and then I'll put it into my voice, because a lot on Chat GPT is very passive voice. And so that's what a lot of people say, that's how they hear the automation, or they can tell that this has been a automated thing. I've also been playing with Bard, and this is the one thing I've really been working on, and that is tweets, because you can ask for it to create a tweet with hashtags, and it'll come with something like, for instance, this one saying office hours is now open, have a burning question or need guidance, drive by and stay high. Hashtag office hours, ask me anything, and open for business. And then I've also been playing with Bard, which is Google's version of GPT, and it does a lot better job. I had it write an article. It gave me all the reference points, all the footnotes that I had that they found them from, like Wikipedia or whatever. And so I could actually use that article a little bit better. And it's separated it more like a blog post than something like GPT has been able to do. And of course, writing a tweet, of course, just as easy. Their version was join my office hours today to help with your homework, ask questions about the class, or just chat with me. Hashtag office hours, hashtag student success, hashtag ask a professor.
Nigel?
Yeah, I was with the team this week, and I wanted to talk to them about what we could do to be more effective. And I thought to myself, I don't know how to say this differently. So I asked ChatGPT. I said, what advice could I give to a team to be more successful? And it gave me 7 points, and the 7 points were really good, really clear. So that's what I told them.
Alex?
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I think that, we're going to see, we're really in the early days of what we're seeing here. So we're playing with it. And a lot of the reason that I keep it open all the time, as well as Midjourney, is because I'm just trying to think about what I can do with it. But I think you're going to see things where it's taking live footage, it's analyzing it, it's summarizing it, it's breaking it into many languages. And I think that it's going to be a really exciting, both good and bad, but very exciting structure that we're going to see a lot more of. I mean, I think that it's going to revolutionize education. Like, we're in Education Day, and I know that a lot of teachers are afraid of kids writing their papers with ChatGPT and so on and so forth. But the real value is kids being able to write something, ChatGPT being able to analyze it and tell them these are all the things that you could have done better, and even rewriting it and handing it back to them so they can see what it looks like as more as a practice. They can sit there and get that. And that's a level of input that a teacher could never scale to, to have, because a teacher, if you had 200 papers to do, that would take weeks. ChatGPT can do it in 15 seconds and give you something that is it as good as the teacher? Maybe not, but could but it'll be 90%. That's what we're finding, is that 90% accuracy is pretty good, and better than the feedback that most of the kids are doing, because they could do a paper every night or a paper every week, and it wouldn't overwhelm the system. And so I think that it's going to be really exciting to see how it works.
Next question.
Brody Hefner from New York City is up next. Dolby Labs and Audible just announced a new collection of stories produced in spatial audio for Atmos-enabled devices. Is this the future of high-end narrative audio content? See latest news at this link, and there's a link.
Dave?
I'm not an Audible user, so take that with a grain of salt. Reading a book is a singular experience. It's sort of a you in the book. And I can't really understand how Audible would have spatial, unless, of course, it's just atmospheric sound effects or something to augment the narration. But I believe most people would listen to Audible books with headphones on or in a car or in a solitary environment. They're not sharing it with someone sitting next to them. So I don't know what the spatial environment would be for sitting in a room with 7 speakers and be able to hear a whole jungle for some sort of story. But maybe an enhancement like that is the new thing that people will catch on to.
Alex?
So I've been using Audible. I probably have 400 or 500 books in Audible, and I've been using it since 1995 or 1996. So almost since its inception. It's the only way that I read. I generally read books, and so what I would say is that I don't read any fiction because I just don't find it to be compelling. It's not a compelling use of time. I'm usually just absorbing as much information as I can. I'm listening to it at 2x. I'm just kind of, plowing through things on Audible. I will say that this is the first thing that I've heard that had me think, oh, it might be interesting to listen to a narrative, something, in this area. And the thing that I think is, a lot of times books are oftentimes playing to what we call the theater of the mind. And being able to create those things and be able to hear them around you, I think could be really interesting. So you have different voices, but then you also have, these are for the high-end narrative, and you hear sound effects. You can imagine a Harry Potter where you hear everything all around you, and you wouldn't sit in a room. It'll use binaural or immerse spatial within the Apple iPhones and so on and so forth. But the idea is that you would hear this whole thing happening all around you while you're hearing the book. I think it's a huge jump forward, and I think that I think that it actually has me interested in listening to narrative books again. And I haven't read a narrative book in 40 years.
Nigel?
Yeah, also a big Audible listener, a lot of fiction and non-fiction. On the fiction front, there typically are sort of 3 modes I found. There's the single reader, which is absolutely dependent on the skill of that reader to be the different voices. There's the sort of dual reader, which is typically a man and a woman, although it always slightly feels like they were recorded at completely different times in completely different studios and added together later. But the man speaks the man's part, the woman speaks the woman's part, for instance. And then you actually get multicast ones, and there are some incredible multicast things done on Audible. I have to tell you, lots of them come from the BBC that has been doing this for a long time as part of its Radio 4 program. And I would tell you that there are producers like Dirk Maggs who are absolutely the experts at doing this, from the way he updated The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy to some of the Marvel DC stuff. And I will tell you that if you listen to one of those on Audible, it's like going to the cinema where you get to pick what the picture looks like. They're really incredible. So there's a much broader range than just a single person reading a book.
Okay, Courtney?
Yeah, I'm kind of waiting for somebody like NPR, to take their This American Life and Radio Lab and putting them to the type of Dolby Surround or Atmos, where as they are now, they're really rich in sound effects and atmospherics, and they really establish the location each of the people are visiting or reporting from. And I think something like that would be a good application of Atmos.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that we learned doing a lot of the Atmos work that I've done is that when you kind of tickle the brain from different locations, the brain builds a space. In your mind, you build a space of what you're paying attention to because you heard something back here, or you heard something over here, and it makes the space feel bigger. It doesn't feel like it's in your head. Like most of the time when we listen to a book, it feels like it's in our head, and it pulls us out into this world because you're constantly telling it there's something there. And I think that that's going to make the books feel very, very different. I also think, to tie back to the last conversation, you're going to see these books get analyzed by AI over a not distant time. They won't be as good as the BBC, but a small publisher will be able to do these, push a book into a system and get something with multiple voices and sound effects and everything else all appearing, into it, which is, 90% of the quality of a produced event.
Jeffrey.
Oh, I think it can go way past that. I was just brought back to the 70s when I was listening to the radio, and we'd listen to those Star Wars episodes on like 90.1 FM, and that was barely stereo at the time. But imagine if you could take a book like that or an audio sound like that, and then all of a sudden turn it into something spatial. There's a lot of open source books. I read a few of them. I actually did a couple voices at LibriVox, which is an online website that does public domain books, and you can read chapters and then post them up on there, and they'd put it into the books, and you can listen to the books, which is great. You add spatial to that, and all of a sudden it's a new experience. So I could see like just going to the backlog and just kind of making new books and making new sounds, the Doctor Who stuff, as Nigel was talking about. If you've never heard one of those audiobooks before, you should definitely give yourself a treat. But I'm also thinking that we should lead by example, and maybe we should put together a team that is going to tackle an audiobook, something public domain, and then create something. We've got, somebody like Greg that deals with sound effects, and then just kind of put something together and show what we can do.
I'm with you, Jeffrey. And I think that we could even just get Chat GPT to write us something that's short and sweet and a whole story, and then just put it in as an example of just so that we can play with the technical and we don't have to worry about any of the rights or anything else. And it'll be short. It'll be 5 minutes long, and it could be fun. So let's talk about that. I was thinking the same thing when Jeffrey said it. I was like, just before Jeffrey said it, I was like, oh, we could do this thing. And then Jeffrey started talking about it. Yeah, we should do that. So we'll talk more about building maybe a little team to do a test.
All right, office hours. Let's hold them to it. I like to see that. Mickey mentions, weighs in from the chat, mentioned the budget aspect of things. He says a majority of the audio productions just don't have the budget for it as far as whether it's the future. But maybe
that's why I mentioned that eventually you'll pump the thing into AI and it will pump out the entire book. and it'll happen in about a minute, and all the sound effects will be inserted, and it will, is it going to be as good as someone doing it by hand? No, it will not be as good as a production company that is doing it by hand. But will someone with no budget, a little sci-fi thing be able to put something together that's very compelling? Probably.
John?
One of the guys on my team has written 7 books on Chat GPT and has converted them using 11 labs, and they're up in Audible and they're selling right now. So it's real straightforward to do.
Fantastic. Let's go to our next question.
It is from Gordon Lake from Los Angeles, California. Gordon says, I asked Google's Bard and Chat GPT the same question, and not only was Bard's answer better, its format was presentation ready. Can Stream Deck be used to move responses over a graphic and into a show close to real time?
Jeffrey?
If I read that correct, well, first of all, Google Bard is in beta right now, of course, and so it's very limited access. What you have to do is you have to go in and then just give them your email and wait until they say you got access. And I totally agree. Like I said, I wrote a whole article I thought I could copy and paste that, and it was ready for publish. But I always want to put my own voice to what was put together. So I did a little bit of editing from there. Putting it into something that Companion would use for a graphic in real time, you would have to figure out a way to copy and paste that to that graphic. Bard doesn't have that functionality. Chat GPT might have a little bit better functionality to it because you can get Chat GPT through third-party things like Discord. You can actually get a Chat GPT bot. So by doing that, there's a better chance of you being able to send something, results over into a graphic from there. But there's still going to be a lot of legwork that you're going to have to do before you can switch that over.
John?
I read that question totally differently. I thought that the question at the end was what our producer put into the prompt and said that Bard did better than ChatGPT. So I read that. from what I've seen, the people I know who use both, they've mostly said that ChatGPT or even Microsoft Bing Chat, which is based on GPT-4, are vastly superior to Bard. So I think a lot of it has to do with how do you put the prompt in? And there are probably one of them might be more conversational or maybe more technical or maybe just connects better to the prompts you put in is my guess there. But what I've heard is most people prefer ChatGPT.
Alex, did we come up with a better phrase than diffusionist? I think someone had
prompt engineer, diffusionist. I think those are the ones we've been talking about. You know, I don't think it. I think that the main thing is that we've experimented with it where we say, give me 10 questions that are about a subject. Give them a name and a city. Make the cities in multiple countries. Make the names appropriate to the location. And and ask them as if I was as if I was an expert or a novice or whatever, or a teacher, and it will just go and just give you all of those in whatever format you tell it to do. One of the things we're experimenting with we show off Mukana a lot for clients, and what we think would be really great is for all the questions to be appropriate for that client. So it'd be about the subject that client was in. Usually, I just have whatever. Something has happened in the past in Mukana, and I use those, and it's really hard to fill those all out so I can fill the entire system so they can see what it would look like when it was running. And so we're looking at integrating Chat GPT into Mukana so that I can just say, I need you to give me 100 questions about Mickey Mouse, or 100 questions about airplanes or something like that, and let it fill that so that when I'm doing a demo, I can have all of that there. So the answer to this question, I don't know about Bard as much, but with ChatGPT, there's an API. And so you could have an API feeding, just literally just building the data that's necessary for SPX or other graphics systems, just filling all that data in JSON or in something else, and just putting it in the format that's needed for the graphics and then be able to access it. So this is absolutely doable in that process.
John?
I also think that as organizations start to use these tools, what you'll find is those organizations that use Microsoft products will stick to ChatGPT and Microsoft's implementation of it, because then you don't have to worry about your employees putting information into the internet for everyone to see, because they're going to be able to silo the information you're using in your organization's instance. And I think that will be a major deal for a lot of companies, especially those who deal with things like health information, that sort of content.
Next question.
From Douglas Carmichael. Douglas says, ARM is talking about raising prices for licensing their chip architecture. Considering Apple has made an all-in bet on Apple Silicon as the future of the Mac, could this negatively affect the Mac platform in the future?
Nigel.
So I believe Apple has an architecture license with ARM, which is a license it probably got to write itself and probably has its own terms and conditions, unlike anybody else, which probably keeps it protected. I think it's worth considering that if you're going to build your own microprocessor, which is a complicated thing to do, you start with an instruction set. There really are two different choices, one called RISC, one called CISC, which RISC is the reduced instruction set, which is typically what an ARM system is, or RISC. There's an open source RISC as well. And the other is the CISC, which is much more like an x86. You've got to pick one of those, and they're real hard to do. And you can't typically license x86. There's a lot of complexity around that. So you're going to pick RISC, you're going to pick open source RISC or ARM, you're going to build an architecture license, then you do it the rest yourself. So I think if there was to be a restatement of that license, that architecture license, which I suspect nobody really knows what's in it, there would be a minor increase in price per unit. It would be a lot of money to ARM, but it wouldn't be a lot of money on a processor. And I think Apple probably has plenty of leeway in it. But I would also guess that, well, you say they're all in, they're probably looking at the RISC and open RISC and all the other ones at the same time, really understanding the difference and the variety. And it wouldn't surprise me at some point to see a blended model.
Courtney?
Yeah, Nigel covered a lot of the points. When you think of Apple affecting Apple's market, they're in a 43% or 42.7%, I think is their last year profit margin on their hardware, on their computer hardware. So it's just a minuscule amount of the cost of producing each one of those MacBook Pros or any of their computer hardware, and they do pay the licensing fee, but I doubt it would affect their bottom line in any way. A bigger market that will be affected will be Android, because RISC-V, which is what Nigel spoke of as open architecture, is without license. And it says here that Google wants to move RISC-V into Tier 1 Android architecture. So for Android architecture, it's going to be very effective. So this is the really cheap. There's very little profit margin on these RISC boards, and these are the boards that are going to compete with the Raspberry Pi. They're just now getting into the market using this RISC-V open architecture. So that could mean a lot cheaper single board computers out there that don't have to pay that licensing fee, and so that ARM increasing their licensing fee may eventually eliminate them from the single board computer market.
John.
Yeah, if the price increase substantially changes Apple's cost of goods sold, they'll raise their prices to maintain the margins they need. They're still probably saving money on designing their own chips than they would purchasing the chips from another company directly.
Jeffrey.
So the reason why this is all happening is because Qualcomm bought a company called Nuvia. Qualcomm was ARM's biggest chip manufacturer, and with this Nuvia chip, which is a onboard type chip, it could change the way that they have a contract with ARM. So therefore, ARM would be working in the red, and so they have to make up somewhere. Apple does help with ARM chip, and of course, NVIDIA with their new line of servers with the dual ARM chips. That's definitely going to help with the production, but they got to figure out costs somewhere. So there's a little bit of change in the landscape. I think it'll work itself out, and yeah, there'll always be a price increase. There's just no way around that.
Next question.
Paul Terry Walhouse from Austin, Texas wants to know, what do you do with your headphones and your headphone cord when you're not wearing them?
TJ?
For my regular cans, the bigger ones, I just set them on my desk and have the cord loosely coiled. I don't ever wrap it around the headphones or anything like that. And for my in-ear monitors, which tend to have much thinner, more delicate cables, I actually lay them out. I sort of drape them over a box, and so that the cable just hangs loose down towards the floor, and nothing is putting any pressure on the cable.
Courtney?
Yeah, I also take my IEMs and just lay them over the top of my ATEM and my mixer when I'm not using it, so it's stretched out. For the headphones, like the V6s here, that fold up nicely, the suggestion from Sony, of course, it comes with the coiled cord, which is the nemesis of everyone. And the suggestion, it comes in a little bag with a little drawstring on it. And the way they suggest to put it in there is to start with the connector, and you lower that into the bag, and then lower the coiled cord in first, and the last thing to go in are the headphones. And that keeps the cord out of the way, it keeps it untangled, and when you pull them out of the bag, the headphones come out first, and then the cord feeds out naturally and doesn't get tangled.
Jeffrey?
Check out a company called Vivo, V-I-V-O. They have a lot of great devices that hook over a desk. This one is actually a cup mount, which can do different types of cups. This coffee cup right here actually fits into here, which is great. But you also have it for headphones. I have a pair down in the basement that's holding my headphones and actually a couple other cords as well. That's the big problem with those is they become a cord holder for all your cords. And but the best part about those headphone holders is they'll flip around, so you can put the headphones in, flip it underneath the desk, and then they're not in the way. And then when you need it, just turn it around and pull out your headphones, put them on, you're good to go. VIVO is the company, by the way.
Nigel?
So I have a very expensive solution to some of these problems from my kitchen cabinet. So this has a magnet on it, and this has a drawer on it. And this magnet sticks to my mic arm, and I either put my Angry Audio breakaway thing in there, or I put something in that, or I put the headphones over those. And I found these a very simple and convenient way if you attach them to your mic stand but don't operate them while you're trying to talk on it.
I have the Angry Audio as well. Nigel, are you tempted, since you have that connector, to buy a few extra to be able to change out different things you want to plug into them?
So I tend to use the Angry Audio with my in-ear monitors, which I use most of the day. I have an in-ear that does this. I use, when I'm doing office hours, I actually use these Linsols, and I have them connected to, the Rode Go 2, so I can move around and do things in the morning. When I'm at my mixer, I have a set of hardwired cans that just stand on the side.
And Mickey from chat reminds us not to forget about over-under for our straight wrapped cables. And of course, sometimes you can disconnect some of the IEMs from their cord when stowing them. Let's go to our next question.
Mark Steele from Orlando, Florida asks, yesterday's gray matter with iJustine illustrated a perfect example of why Alex makes users wanting to join office hours in Mukana jump through a few hoops. There were a couple of users flooding the chat with garbage for about 10 minutes. Thoughts?
Alex?
I don't think it was 10 minutes, but it might have been. But I think it felt like an eternity because it was happening. But I think it was only 3 to 5 minutes that we had that problem, maybe even less. But I talked to Justine before the show, and I said, "Hey, I'd like to do can you tweet this out so that I can test the system against stress?" And so that was done. It was and I told her there's a 30% chance it'll be amazing. There'll be a 30% chance it'll be meh. And there'll be a 40% chance it'll be a flaming fireball, and for the most part, it worked out really well. We got some great questions. We got great interaction. We did get attacked by some folks in China, and we were able to tamp it down. What was great is that they were very kind to show us a gap in our system that we're now working on closing up. And so you'll see us doing more tweet outs and so on and so forth with Michael Krasny's gray matter. Occasionally, we'll do another one next week. I'll just do the tweet. I'm not going to but we have Walter Murch on next week, and so I'll probably tweet it out a little bit. What we'll tend to do is send it. We're doing kind of a system where we send it out to everyone in gray matter as well as office hours to get in there, get your questions asked early, so that if anything goes wrong, we already have all the questions that we need. So before we tweet it out to the public, we're kind of letting the gray matter group as well as the office hours group get in there, ask your questions, vote on the questions. We then archive those to make sure that we can grab them if anything horrible happened. Nothing happened. I mean, Justine's what happened. You will see we did make it a little easier. There's a splash page that you could go to, and we're kind of really working on, and we're figuring out how to put video into the mobile version. It's there. It's hidden if you actually go to the mobile version, or if you open up the full version on your phone and then go up, and you'll see video. And if you click on video or answered, you'll see a video on the screen. So we're trying to figure out how to integrate that. Anyway, so you'll see a bunch of movement there. So it was a little bit of a garbage. It wasn't as bad as it could have been. And so they were kind enough not to do anything really horrible, but show us that there was a weakness that we hadn't seen before. So that's what we're going to do. And we're doing it specifically to harden the system as we get ready to make it more available, is to harden it outside of everybody's good people, but it does show you how we've been able to kind of hide, by making things hard to get into. We've had very few problems in this process, but there were some defense mechanisms that are built into office hours that, not office hours, but Mukana, that were very effective. We were able to finally just clip the users, close the event so that no one new could come in, and that was pretty effective. Unfortunately, we cut a couple people out that had left for a second, then couldn't get back in. So we're working on a bunch of different things that we can do to make that a lot better. But it was a really interesting experience and a great conversation with Justine.
Well, speaking about questions are what drive our show. Feel free to vote on the questions that you want to see answered most. And feel free to put in the questions for our second hour discussion, just coming up in another 20 minutes, where we'll talk about education and also maybe what you learned from office hours on that note. Let's go to our next question.
Craig McFarland wants to know, when there are two people on the screen, would it help to slightly bump the left channel for the left speaker and the same for the right?
Alex?
We have been talking about doing that, leaning the even in this panel. What we're thinking about is we know where everybody is because Isadora is setting those all up in the super sources. We could spread everybody out so that they're talking and you kind of hear it there. And we've experimented with a little bit, especially as it relates to 5.1. We're not sure how much we're going to do that. Blue Jeans does that right now and uses Dolby's Atmos to kind of spread people out. But the problem with Blue Jeans is that it randomly throws people into, it doesn't know where everybody is. And, so it kind of randomly throws people. So it's really weird to have one person over here who's coming out of this speaker. So I think that part of what will make that work is if we can pull that together where they are in the screen affects where they are in the speakers. And I do think from the experiments we've done already, subtlety will be the important part. Like slightly one way or slightly the other.
Next question.
Craig McFarland wants to know, I need new in-ear monitors. Any recommendations up to $300 or so?
TJ?
I actually have 3 different pairs of in-ear monitors. I have the Linsols, which a lot of people have based on George Whittam's recommendation, and they're pretty good with the Comply foam. They do tend to block out a lot of sound, and they sound pretty decent. I also have a pair of Ear Heroes that are a bit more discreet. However, the sound quality of those tends, because it's really geared more towards voice, it's kind of really mid-rangey sounding because, again, it's kind of designed for security or law enforcement, and they really need to hear voice, and it needs to kind of cut through. And then the third pair, which was a recommendation from Alex Knight, are these Westone Pro X30 in-ear monitors, which I'm wearing right now. And they sound fantastic as far as a full range of highs to lows. And they're very discreet. They're actually more discreet, almost than my Ear Heroes. The cable is very thin on these things. And I'm really liking these a lot. And all of them are less than $300.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I think it depends on what you're trying to do with them. And so are you listening to music, or are you doing a show like this, or you're on Discord? I find that the Linsols have been really successful for me for this show. And I haven't really found ones above these that I've really liked for a long time under $300. There's some that I like at $800, $900, $1,000. But the 300 to 500 or 300 to 800 has been kind of a no man's land for me. So I haven't really figured that out. So the Linsols have been fine for being on Zoom. I will say be careful with the complies. I bought ones that said that they were designed for the Linsols specifically, and they broke the Linsols when I put them on. So be careful of being gentle with them and figuring out exactly. We have to figure out which ones match which ones, because the Amazon is not accurate.
Yeah, I believe Linsol is the vendor. The KZ, ZS, some of them are using ZS10, ZS10 Pros. The nice thing is if you get them from some other retailers, you can get them even cheaper than Amazon. And try a few out. See what you think.
The ones you have to pay attention to all the little details that are in there. The $50 one is the one that I'm using. The ones that are $130 are actually very uncomfortable for me to wear, and the ones that we did have a discussion about, the ones that were like $25, and they sound like they're underwater. So the price does. I mean, look at the ones that you just want to be kind of careful of which ones you buy there.
There is like a myriad of those little qualifiers after each of them. And I find I use this one, they don't sound as good as the one that have more drivers that I found with them. And I have some of the 10 Pros, the ZX 10 Pros, which also sound better, but these suffice, and they're less visible is another factor that you might have as far as which one you're using if you're on camera. Let's go to our next question.
From James Babbitt in San Diego. Please say more about putting a Chat GPT bot in Discord. Is a Chat GPT subscription required?
John?
Food for thought. The API for Chat GPT for GPT-4 is not available yet. So, and there's a significant difference between 3.5 and 4.0. If you want to use 4.0 for free right now, I suggest you use Benq.
Jeffrey?
So to actually bring any bot into Discord, you basically just have to invite it to the server that you're going through. I love this because I can create my own private server, and even though the conversations aren't back and forth privately, like for instance Midjourney, unless you have a subscription tier that does that, you at least have a place to find all your previous Midjourneys and Chat GPTs. So I put the link of where you would go, the exact link on how to find this. These are all the Chat GPT inserts that you can, or bots that you can put into whatever Discord server. Just watch it, and because these are not official. They're all created by third parties. And so you just want to watch a little bit, make sure that the one that you put in there is not going to either try to steal your data or do something that can harm things. So, but that's basically how you do it.
Courtney?
And also, it doesn't necessarily have to do with the Discord, perhaps, but Chat GPT just announced a plugin architecture that they're going to implement just a couple of days ago. It's not live yet. You can join the waitlist, but this architecture allows you to do things like bring in Expedia information or other types of data into a GPT search engine. A Kayak, for example, for arranging room reservations, or OpenTable for looking for reservations at restaurants, etc. And these kind of plugins now will be available within the GPT architecture, and I think that's going to change a lot of stuff very rapidly as soon as that launches into the wild.
Next question.
From Simon Ray in Midlands, UK. Simon says, when trying to sign up to the Bard waitlist, it's insisting I sign in from a personal account rather than workspace account. The account I am signed in with is my personal non-workspace account. Is there any way to get Bard to accept this?
Alex?
Yeah, I'd like to know whether, and I don't know the answer to this, I'd like to know whether when you say it's a personal account, is it something that you've put your own URL into and it's your personal account, or whether it's an absolute Gmail account. I think it probably needs an absolute Gmail account, but I'm not 100% sure.
Jeffrey?
That's what I'm thinking too. Unless, and to Alex's point, is this an email? Like, for instance, I have a Geekazine email that is actually a Google account. Will that work or not? I'll have to test that. But when I use my Gmail account, it's fine. Keep in mind, once again, this is in a very tight beta, so they'll open it up eventually. But right now, they probably want to keep it as best as possible and try a Gmail account and to get in and test it out.
Next question.
Stephen Podmore from London says, I use Luna Display to flip or reverse my iPad 12-inch for use in a teleprompter. However, I'm having stability issues when starting and arranging displays on my 2019 16-inch MacBook Pro and Benq 4K monitor. Any ideas?
Alex?
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure of what the answer is here, but I will say that one of the problems you get into when you're an early adopter to something, whether it's a developer or the person buying that software, is that they got ahead and used libraries or tools within the system that were not the way Apple was going to do it, down the road. And Apple has built its own way of doing this now. And so I think that one of the things you're going to have trouble with is that they're probably depreciating some of the bits and pieces inside the OS that would allow that is probably problematic for Luna because they have their own way of connecting all of these devices. And so Luna is probably, because it was ahead of time. We've seen this in a lot of different software. Playback Pro is a good example. They took huge advantage of really giving you the full technical access to the screens and everything else, but as the operating system updated and moved forward, they couldn't keep up with everybody else who was just using the libraries Apple gave them. And so you have to be very careful when you hack things with a Mac OS system, because Apple doesn't care about backwards compatibility. So you get into something, you get something working, and it just slowly unwinds. And I think that's probably what you're experiencing now. You probably could use, if you're using a more modern if you're using Ventura, even though there's a lot of things I don't like about it, you should find that you can seamlessly move between Apple devices. If they're all up to date, you can seamlessly move through all of them relatively effectively.
Good, Gordon?
As far as teleprompter reversal screens go, I'm really against doing it in software or in the display drivers of the device itself, like from your iPad. I prefer using a monitor where you can reverse the image in the monitor. That way you can have correct reading on some monitors, and then monitors that are into a mirror, you can have them reversed all from the same feed. I've found these eYoYo monitors, which is a funny name, eYoYo. They make a lot of security monitors, and they make some great. We use these in a lot of teleprompters because they have all have left-right mirroring built into the monitor itself, and they all have a variety of inputs, including HDMI, composite video, component video, and VGA. So they work quite well, and they're not too expensive, so you can find them out there as a good solution for a teleprompter monitor without having to deal with the software incompatibility of trying to reverse it in your iPad or your computer.
Not a thought, Alex?
Yeah, and if you're using actual teleprompt software, the teleprompt software should be able to flip it in the software. If it can't, don't use it. like don't. I mean, I saw someone use Word for teleprompting. I was like, that's not, that doesn't work. So I've never used a piece of teleprompt software that can't do it. Like I maybe it's that doesn't do it on the outside. So I don't know how that would work. To make that happen. Courtney may be able to instruct that to me, but the problem is you can't do what Courtney's doing because he's trying to do it to a 12-inch iPad. So he's trying to get it out to an iPad. So there's not going to be any way to do it there. If that's what he's using there. But I all the software that I use on the Mac for teleprompting has a button that just flips it without any. And even my software, the software that works with Mukana, you just push one button and it just reverses all the text.
Courtney?
Yeah, and like I mentioned, the problem with that is the operator has to read the text correctly, so off of the duplicate feed. But it can reverse software. It can reverse the feed on an external monitor, but that feed then is all reversed. So if you want to send that external feed that goes out, other than your LCD feed that's in your laptop, to multiple monitors, perhaps for something over the shoulder or for the producer to look at, it's all going to be reversed there. So if you're not going to be going into a mirror on everything, that's why having the software reverse it really is not a good workable idea unless you're just running your own teleprompter and you're the only one viewing it.
Yeah, the software that we've used, the operator still sees it regular. The external monitor goes reversed, and I guess we've just never needed. You do more complicated teleprompting than we do. We have a teleprompter operator who's operating something in a teleprompter sitting, either remotely or there, and it's just them seeing it. So interesting.
And Courtney, I've checked out that brand. What's the largest monitor that they make? Do they make one larger than 12 inches?
Oh yeah, they make 15s and 17s.
Okay, and they do.
And most of them, they do make 4x3 monitors, which are used for security monitoring. They're not real high resolution, but you don't need real high resolution for teleprompting unless you're using it just as a Interatron that has something other than just a person's image on it. If you're using it as a computer monitor or something with fine text on it, you don't really need that. Because in teleprompting, you're doing, 85-point text, so it doesn't matter that it's, it's 1280 by 720 or so on.
When I originally ventured out to flip I'm using a teleprompter of my own device, and it's 16 inches. And when I looked for, I first wanted Courtney's solution of having it flip itself, and I couldn't find anything 16:9 because I wanted to put a full screen in there that would do it. Unfortunately, for that size, so since I use OBS anyway, I can flip and custom make whatever I use mine more as an Interatron, so just to keep eye contact as opposed to actually serving me teleprompted content. But that's helpful if you are already using vision mixing software. You can flip and rotate just the part that goes to that screen and external output. All software caveats apply. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael is in. In an article about transitioning back to in-person sports production, it mentioned getting younger staff on the road and in the truck benefited them professionally. Why could that be? And will remote first win in future due to rising costs?
Go ahead, John.
It helps you build relationships with people when you're driving across the country with them for many, many hours, and that having relationships at work helps your career.
Dave?
I've worked in a lot of production trucks, and it's the cohesion of the team. And you won't believe it, but doing production of live sports and that is a team sport, and everyone feeds off each other's energy. They learn to trust each other. They learn to understand the other person's tension level, and you all learn that professional level of stay even and let the show continue. Don't worry about what just happened. I think it benefits anyone new to the business to be in a truck for a while and spend time with the team, travel on the road with them, follow what everyone does, and you all get better together. course, there's always the person who doesn't like being in close quarters with other people, but that's a choice they have to make. I think, the article, I haven't read it, probably refers to that new people in the workforce need to have mentors, and they need to see how the whole operation works. And if you do that remotely, the energy isn't shared. The people don't get the energy from someone else's contribution. And there's a little bit of high-fiving and celebration when a show was over that we all did a great job, and that was an outstanding performance that some cameramen did. So I think it's very beneficial.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people can work remotely. I think the problem really is with physical events. If you're interacting with a physical event, you kind of need to understand what's happening there. It's really easy for you to make up models of things that just aren't accurate to what's actually happening when you see it in a box. When you're actually there, we have a lot of issues. We've been doing virtual events, of course, for more than 10 years. And you have producers that are off site that until they've been on site, they're like, I don't understand why no one's responding to me, or I don't understand why they couldn't just do this. I don't understand why. And after you've been on the show, you understand that there's a whole bunch of things that were happening at that moment. You understand what the challenges are in the field, so that when you're remote, you can dance with that more effectively. So I think it is important. And most people that end up in those trucks, I mean, they worked in those trucks as running cables and wiring things for a decade sometimes before they got to do anything real. So I think that it is an important part of learning how all those things work on the ground. I think that you will see more virtual remote production that doesn't exist anywhere and never will. And in those cases, I don't know if people need to be somewhere, because there won't be anywhere to be, but probably not with sports.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael wants to know, what techniques have worked to help keep emotionally charged conversations with customers or coworkers, for example, on an even keel?
Dr. Clark?
Well, I think that when the temperature starts to rise, people who are pushing the tension want to be understood and taken seriously. So some of the language I've used in situations like that to keep things on an even keel, as Douglas asks, is to say thank you first. Thank you for your contribution, what you just said. And you could take it farther by saying, as I understand what you're saying, this is what I understand you to be saying. So that kind of active listening technique helps the speaker to believe that you actually heard and understood, or gives an opportunity to correct or fine-tune the message that you received. Finally, I've been in situations where someone has pushed a set of ideas that aggressively that are different from my own, and instead of attacking or being defensive, what I like to say is thank you, and I see it a little bit differently, and then I have my turn in framing the issue or the debate in a way that makes sense to me. So you're not attacking the other position directly. You're saying, yes, and there's another way to look at it, and here's my version of a way to look at it. Of course,
John?
It helps to be calm yourself.
Oops, sorry, Dr. Clark. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, in customer service training, I recommend we use a technique called triangulation. It looks something like this. Usually when you think about a relationship, you think of two people. And when they're in conflict, you think of a conflict showing up between them like this. And it blocks your barrier to communication. When that happens, though, you're viewing the other person through the conflict, and you dehumanize them, and you distort your picture of who they are. A better technique we like to do is called triangulation, where you recognize the conflict as a different thing than the two different people. You come alongside together, and you both look at that conflict, and you try to solve it as a pair instead of trying to attack each other. That's a technique used in various forms of family systems theory, and that's what I recommend my agents do.
Nigel.
All good advice. The only thing I would add to that is, at some point, if that person's amygdala hijacks their brain, and they go off the end, you are going to be able to do nothing for the next 20, 30 minutes to solve that problem. And so sometimes the best answer is to disengage and come back later.
Let's go to our next question.
And our final question for the first hour, Tommy Chance from St. Paul, Minnesota. What would be a good monitor to mount to the lid of a Pelican case?
Jeffrey?
I would never mount a monitor straight to the Pelican case, because if something happens, you could easily sit on a Pelican case and all of a sudden that spiders the whatever monitor you choose. What I highly recommend is getting something like this. It's upside down. It's called the Vivo mount. And yeah, I talked about Vivo twice today. This is awesome. Vivo makes these. These are basically mounts for monitors. You can put a VESA on here. You don't need to put a VESA on the Pelican. But the best part is you can remove whatever monitor. These little production 15.6-inch monitors. This is one from Innocent. That's also a touch screen. Can be easily put into this VESA mount adapter. Or you can also get yourself an iPad, and if you've got if you work on the Mac line, you can use the iPad with something like Duet that will go into a Mac Mini, and then all of a sudden that becomes a touchscreen monitor for whatever you're doing. So, but I would not put the monitor directly onto the Pelican case. I'd use something like this.
Thank you, Jeffrey. And as TJ mentioned, that was our last first hour question. So stay tuned. We're going to switch right into our education hour topic. Before we do, we'd just like to remind everyone that our email is out with our next week's topic. We have a fantastic lineup. We have guests Bryn Drescher and Cheryl Ottenritter. If you'd like to find out about their expertise, go ahead and check out the email. Also, green screen and video playout will be the topics we'll be discussing next week. John, what's up for our education hour?
Thanks, Josh. Today we'll be taking a look back on the last 3 years with an emphasis on the interaction between office hours and the educational world. If you think about it, office hours is primarily a knowledge transfer platform, which is just a fancy way of saying it's an educational institution in some respects. We have a couple of our longtime educational panelists back for a visit, so we'll have a chance to check in with them and see how they've been doing. As always, our direction is set by our producers. So producers, make sure you put in your questions into Mukana and vote for those questions you want to hear first. To start, what I'd like to do is have our panelists share what have you learned over the past 3 years, especially as a result of office hours, and what has office hours contributed to that learning. Go ahead, Alex.
I think just the one thing that I wanted to set up is that office hours is very much built for education. like that was what it was. That was part of the design, was to figure a bunch of things out, and also collect a lot of people that would be interested in that type of thing. And the reason that we really focused, one of the things about office hours is having this discussion, is this is one of the hardest things to do in a classroom. So there's a lot of other things that there's curriculum, and there's but how do you figure out how to have the actual class, the discussion about questions and so on and so forth? How do you build the tools that are necessary to have that be something that can be done? And so, office hours has tackled that in a lot of ways of figuring this out over the last 3 years. And I've learned an immense amount about, and about how that works. We've developed, it was one of those things that we Mukana has long existed before office hours, but I got to a point, and I didn't want to intermingle those things because I was like, it's a business on its own. And I was like, I don't want people to feel like I'm trying to do something with it or whatever, and I don't want to put it in there. But the question system in Zoom was so rudimentary that I just couldn't take it any longer. So we tried for a while to not do that. And I was like, I can't. I have this great tool. It's like you have a Ferrari in the house, and in the garage, and you're driving this little Yugo around, and you're just like, oh my gosh, and finally I just was like, I just got to take the Ferrari out. So I just couldn't take it any longer and put it in, and it's made what's really happened is it's made a huge difference. All the input from everybody has made a huge difference in how Mukana runs and what's possible and how it does what it does from everybody. And we've learned a lot from it. It wasn't something that I wanted to do in the beginning, but I'm really glad that I did to make that happen. And it's been huge. And how we run classes now. I mean, I can imagine these classes like math classes and so on and so forth with 20 teachers or 10 teachers all able to answer those questions, taking so much pressure off of a single one and potentially allowing that to be thousands of students, using being part of one singular conversation. And so I think that it's going to be a really interesting possibility as we move forward.
Yeah, and I think, Alex, you've spoken before about how you started office hours because you wanted to learn something new. You wanted to learn how to use Zoom.
I had to use Zoom. I was like, I don't know how to use this thing, and I'd been using Hangouts for so long, and so it was one of those things. Like I think I couldn't get Anyway, I may go off air for a second and see if I can find this video. I know I have it. I have the opening of 325 that I don't think I've shown anybody since 325. But it was, I look back on it and it was like, yeah, I'm just trying to figure out how to use this Zoom thing. Anyway, so it is. So I did it because I needed to figure out Zoom. We have clients that are coming up that we need to know how it runs. I knew everyone was going to have trouble with. Doing virtual events. Like I was like, the first couple hundred that I did were not very great. We survived them, but they weren't. And I was like, I can save people a lot of time doing that. I can figure out this. I can also be collecting people that I can work with as this demand expands. I need to be able to find more people. I need to be able to, figure this thing out. And so, and I really wanted physical events to go away. If you haven't noticed, because I feel like it excludes a huge part. I fundamentally feel like it excludes a huge part of the world. And and I think that the future of the world is connecting everyone together. And so I think those were some of the reasons that we got started and how we built it.
Yeah, and like so many things that teachers do, teachers figure out how to get things done. They have a need, they learn to scratch, and then they figure out how to share it with others. Dave, what's your experience?
I go back a little bit to my sister was a producer of a TV show that was on every afternoon called Homework Hotline, and it was using the phone to access teachers. And there were a team, I think there were 8 teachers who were on various curriculum subjects. And you could bring your homework question to them, and they would guide you through what you needed to learn to answer that. And that disappeared because of funding issues and of course, popularity issues. But when I saw office hours appear, I kind of saw it as a different kind of homework hotline in that it had people who really knew what they were talking about, which is, what is the education side. But you also had a lot of people who needed quick answers. And this was one of the new media things that I thought was happening here, is that you had now an encyclopedia of people and you could ask them anything. Now, of course, we're all talking now about machines doing that for us, but for the interim, this is a structured, organized, and daily exposure to people who have all kinds of expertise, experience, and insight. And they're from all over the world, which of course struck me as quite imposing, that handling the global aspect of this is what we're going to grapple with for the next year or so. I've changed a few of my ideas about what the usefulness of this is since I've started participating in it. But when I first heard of it, I thought it was just another one of these homework hotline things.
Interesting. I came because it was a homework hotline. Dr. Clark, what's yours?
Before office hours and before I was aware of it, my work as a professor was primarily involved with creating what I call learning community. Shifting from the lecture mode to a much more collective, interactive, peer-driven forum for learning and making sense of experience. And my bias was that would be very difficult or impossible to accomplish that kind of a community remotely. That I had learned how to do it in a 50-seat or a 20-seat seminar room, but I figured it really wouldn't work using video, the forms of video that were available at the time. And now, with two plus years of experience in office hours, I've found that the office hours community is a real community. And we have many, many examples of that from each of our own experiences. But it's kind of been a demonstration case that genuine community, with all of its strengths and possibilities, is possible even when the most of the individuals have never met each other in person. So that's the big idea for me.
It always starts with the human connection. And one of the reasons why I got more involved in office hours was I was in the chat one day, probably spouting something about how terrible learning styles are or something. And then our next panelist, Roscoe, asked me, why don't you join us in after hours and share some of your thoughts? And so I did and kind of got sucked in. Roscoe?
Well, yeah, this is, thank you. It's a great resource. And for me, COVID hit and I'm in the performing arts. And what do you do? And so I was looking for resources, came across this one, and I'll never forget a meeting I had with Jeff, 1F Jeff, 2F Jeff, and 3F Jeff. And that was, I got all this great advice about putting together PTZ cameras. I think it was the Panasonic UE150s, where I didn't know about them, but they said, no, that's the one you want. And so we put in this grant and said, we need money. And the university said, here's $250,000, have at it. I had never seen that kind of money ever. So having this and having these people here that just made sure that even though it's a lot of money, you still want to, it rarely comes and you want to spend it really well. And so just everyone here was so giving of their knowledge, their time, to sit in meetings that were specific to me. You'd go off in these little meetings and they were just great. So that's my memories. And then how giving this community is still to this day of what they know and how freely they offer it.
Thank you. Tony, what's your experience?
I don't know where to start, really and truly, and I'm being sincere when I say that, because there's so much that office hours has mean to me and the communities in which I work with. I just want to say to Alex, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. I think the fact that Conversation with Tony Mobley is now 91 plus episodes, and a lot of you have participated in those conversations. Those conversations have had 4,000 views, and they've had 20 views. And even the 20 views conversation was a meaningful conversation. And it was only because of this community and that I was able to ask questions. But I think more importantly for me is the fact that a small congregation of individuals, primarily in their 60s and up, are able to have worship services together in Zoom. And they're able to have those worship services in a meaningful way. Not only are they continuing to have those worship services, they are now broadcasting those worship services on YouTube. Not only are they broadcasting those worship services on Zoom and YouTube, they are now actually going to be doing a live performance in a Macon theater of their Easter program. And it is only because of office hours that this small local church with a lot of senior citizens are able to do this. And we haven't figured it all out, but that's good, because I get to ask the office hours community more questions about how to figure this out, how to get this production off the ground. And so I'm going to be reaching out to Roscoe for some help on making this the best that it can be. But there are just so many different things. And this idea of a community where no one is left behind is a real one. And I'm so thankful for the friendships, the interactions. Last Sunday, Liberty White was at my house, and we had some barbecue, and it was pretty good. And we had fellowship, and all of the friends that I've had an opportunity to meet and greet through office hours, and the global friendships that I had, people I've never met, but are as close to me as a brother or a very close dear friend. So I could keep going, but I'm going to stop there. But I just want to say to Alex and this community as a whole, thank you for allowing people who you would not have ordinarily had a chance to interact with prior to the pandemic. Thank you for allowing us to be able to connect with one another.
Thanks, Tony. I think you're a good example of the accessibility of this community. And Josh.
Yeah, I can add my own experience. That education really is the reason that I found office hours. When the pandemic started, I started taking up work in virtual production, and I thought to myself, like, this really low friction onboarding environment for Zoom is great, but I wanted to do more than just a plain vanilla Zoom meeting. And when I started thinking about all the different possibilities of how to put that together, it wasn't long before I realized I'm sure I'm not the first person to think about this. Surely there's someone out there that has figured this out better. And so I looked around, and that's where I found Zoom Test Kitchen with Jeff Widgren, and found those groups. And of course, the communities kind of meshed before. It's only so long before you wind up in the office hours swirl from there. So found out about the Zoom ISO communities using ATEMs, vMix, and the like. So it's been a real eye-opener for me. I would say come for the education, stay for the community.
Thanks, Josh. And I joined office hours, like I said, as a result of watching those being in the educational hour on Saturday mornings. But before that, when I first watched, I heard on some podcast, I think it was probably MacBreak, that Alex was going to be talking about how to build a studio. And I thought, well, that's something I want my office to have a better studio, because I teach classes virtually for my work. And so I watched a couple of shows just about studio building at first. And then there were some questions that came in the first half that were about voiceover. And I thought, wow, this could help me explain why my voiceover for the animated cartoon I'm trying to build animated training video is so terrible. And so I learned a lot about mic technique and why my mic was bad, and I ended up getting my first microphone. And then from there, I just learned I would just watch at least the questions every single day to see if there's something I could learn and implement at work. And, I've learned a lot from there, and I'm sure that'll come up in our future questions. But that's what kept me coming, was practical needs that I had solved by this great group of panelists. We're going to dive in next. Dive in next to our next question. Dave, what is that?
Our next question comes from OG1. That is Grant Whitehead in Adelaide, Australia. He's OG1 because he was the first person to sign up to office hours. Happy birthday, office hours. My life, both professionally and personally, is significantly better because of this community. Thanks for continuing to show up. What is some technical advice you have changed over the last 3 years of office hours?
Go ahead, Harshid.
So technically, you should use a better microphone if your microphone isn't sufficing for you. So this community has taught me a lot with just the basis of what sound is, and now I've eaten the red pill, so to speak, and can't listen to anything else that doesn't sound great. So the technical aspects, I think, is even though you start at a little place, a little room, studio, always there's room for improvement. And if you take that technicality piece and put it a little bit to the side, you have more time to work with the overall picture. We all sometimes get sucked into the technicalities of things, but we don't understand why we're doing them. And I think with office hours, we started with Zoom. We came into a room. We started saying, hey, who are you? Hey, who are you? And then we figured out, wow, these are global people here. We come with different abilities, and we always have things to share. So when it comes to the technical aspects, we all have to learn from each other. So we've learned OBS. We've learned ATEMs, this, that, and the other. There's a whole list that we made of even, tech terms that maybe people might not understand to the norm, but we've blended the professional studio life into what now has become a home studio life for a lot of people. And again, that technical aspect of using like a Samson Q2U mic that's hanging above me over here with a boom arm, and that was my first boom arm. That was my first microphone. I used it on a Yamaha MG10XU mixer. Yeah, it's a mouthful. But then came on, I need something better. And why is that better? And to learn about that better. And that only comes from experience, right? So showing up every day, I'm at 215 days consecutive. So I haven't taken a break. I just, even though I don't talk every day on the panel, it's showing up, making sure I hit my marks, making sure my lighting is good. I have the ability to ask somebody, and behind the scenes, and that's all technical. But how do you take that same environment and transpond it into your business, your environment, where you want to have somebody on comms? So then you're not looking silly that, hey, can you change the slides? You're not, having somebody coming to a meeting and then you making your audience wait 30 minutes before you start your show, and it's a global event. So it just gives me a lot of power to take what I've known here, through technology, through screen readers, to teach others about my abilities, and hopefully we will make a better place in this first digital first event type of world.
Thanks. Tony?
Audio, 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 audio. I'm just going to say it. I have 60 plus, 70, 80-year-olds using aftershocks because recommendation by office hours. And so we sound pretty good in the house of worship that I'm working with on Zoom because of that. So I'm just going to say audio.
All right. How about Roscoe?
Wow. Andy Carluccio opened my eyes to a lot of remote control. I mean, I understood SMPTE and timecode and some analog signal paths, but all the protocols that there are available to help us in this area to automate things, to remotely control things, I think that's just that's my eyes have been opened to how much work has been done that we can take advantage of. Some of the sessions on DMX, I knew DMX from a very small controller, but then to see how it got on into a full background of a full concert, and that was very interesting. So I'm going to say protocol is something that I've been made aware of, and I therefore I don't implement them all, but at least I know of them.
And I think I would say for technical advice, how you show up on camera impacts how you're heard. And so it's really common for me, for especially people on my team, to encourage them to put a light behind their camera or raise their laptop up so that you can not look up their nose. These small changes that change how you appear to your audience so you can be taken more seriously and command the room. Classroom management is a skill to learn, and virtual classroom management is a similar skill to learn. And a lot of that has to do with some very basic setup, like where's your light source? Do you have a wired? Are you using at least a boom headset when you're speaking into it? That sort of thing is the technical advice that I've changed significantly. Alex?
I've just learned a lot about team dynamics. So I think that for all of you, there's a lot of technical stuff. For me, it's been this huge operation, of collecting incredible people together and being able to work with everybody and try to keep everybody giving them what they need each time, and failing and succeeding at different times, and doing the best you can. And I think because office hours attracts such a great group of people because of the filtering of just being hard to get into, and it takes the people that are in the Discord, the people that are in the panel, the people that are the producers, because it collects such a great group of people, you can always enter the conversation going, we have different people that are passionate that don't agree with each other or that want to do something different. And you really don't have the same thing in the real world, in the rest of the world, where you always, but you can always come from that position. And I've learned a lot, in that process of working with everybody. And I'm always inspired by the incredible teams and people that are doing things all through office hours. I mean, this started off with me. I can show you, by the way. I think it's the first time anybody's seen this since it happened. And so, other than me, and I found the file. I'm going to put it in like 8 places now. It was sitting on a drive that I just had, and I was like, oh, I got to keep this. And I copied it, and then I've been moving computers around, and it needs to be backed up because this is the original. Do you guys want to see it, or do you want me to?
Let's see it.
Okay.
Sure.
I don't want to force it on you or anything. Hold on. Let's see here.
No. It's history here. We're looking at history.
Let's see here. For some reason, wow. I don't know what Zoom is doing, but it says I can't. Let's see. sorry, I'm in Zoom ISO, which let's see if you actually.
Do you need a minute to continue to set that up, Alex?
Let's see. I'm just. Yeah, go ahead and go to Chris.
Go ahead, Chris.
My takeaway isn't so much about the technical, but it's that about the importance of morale. And I think Alex was hinting at this, that one of the things that makes the office hours experience so positive is that somehow we pay as much attention to the morale of the team and the celebration of milestones and the glorious experience of, whether it was direct or vicarious, of launching rockets into the sky and documenting that outside Las Vegas, makes the technical advice be embedded in a community that cares about one another and has the qualities of generosity and as well as technical expertise that we celebrate so much. So the focus on morale, or as Alex pointed out, team building and team maintenance. It's not enough to just have an A list of expert panelists. It's also about the cultivating the relationships and the humor and the musical strength and all the other interesting capabilities of people that make office hours make me want to come back, keep coming back, even when I'm not engaged in the fine details of technical matters that aren't part of my world as a retired professor. So yeah, it's like being on the best staffed and crewed ship in the Navy. It's a happy ship because it's people care about each other.
Well said, Dr. Clark. And for our producers, I want to remind you that you can continue to put questions into our Mukana chat. If you'd like to ask questions about education, where we've been the last 3 years or where we're going in the future. Alex, were you able to get that video queued up?
I did. And one thing that I just wanted to build on from what Chris was talking about was just that I listen to people say, well, you can't really build connections in an online community. Like you can't, well, you can have a conference, but if you can't have people in there, you can't build connections. I feel far more connected to people and to everyone in office hours than I ever feel with anybody at a conference. And so, it's just a matter of people doing things with each other and making a difference and time, and the time and being able to discuss things and be vulnerable, and all those things can happen anywhere. And I every time someone says that, I don't argue with them anymore. I feel like it's not worth pushing down the path. I'm just like, sure, okay. So like I get that that's what you think, but it's not. It's completely possible. All right, so I'm going to play this. This is 640 by 360 because I didn't know how to do anything else. I think we didn't have anything else back then. And we'll see if this works. So this is how it began. I don't think I've shown this before. Let's see here. Let's share this. Let's see, a little black screen, and here we go. Let me know if you can hear it. Here I am trying to figure this out. Like, can you hear it?
No audio.
It might have been me too. Hold on. Let's see here. I think my audio wasn't working. I'm still trying to figure out how to get it off the ground. Can you hear that?
Negative.
You see it though.
Yeah, we're getting the impression here.
But you can't hear it. It's really quiet, but okay.
Who is that young guy?
I know. So you don't hear anything? I said
right
now to share audio.
But you did look confused at the beginning.
Yeah. No, I don't show very much stuff in the show with audio, so I'm at a and I almost never use screen share. because I hear it, but I don't know why it's not. And let me try it one more time. Sorry for everybody. I'm actually doing something in Zoom I don't do very often. Okay, I'm going to.
This is how we learn things. We're learning from you that sometimes you can't share with the audio. So when you get your solution, you'll share it with us.
Yeah, I'm going to try it. Let me try share sound again. Yeah. Let's see if this works. All right, now let's see if this. You still don't hear it?
No, nothing.
I don't know. It could be the background there. I'll stop. We'll come back to it. Maybe we'll watch it on Sunday. We'll show it. I'll figure out what's going on. I took Zoom off of this machine, so I have Zoom ISO on it. I don't have the regular Zoom on it because I installed Zoom. I accidentally installed the new version of Zoom yesterday, and it broke ACE and loopback, and it just crushed my entire system and almost derailed the entire event that I had. So I just said I'm not going to put Zoom on my machine anymore. So I'm not sure if Zoom ISO is capable of sharing this. So I'll figure out another pipeline for it. But anyway, so
we'll stay tuned and tune in tomorrow to see what that sound was behind that video. Okay. Laura Thompson, one of our back-end crew and guest last week, wanted to share that if you're interested in stepping up your event or media game, you've come to the right place. So it's a great place to learn and grow. We're going to move to our next question. What is that, Dave?
It's from Guy Cochran in Seattle, Washington. What accomplishments has OH achieved?
Go ahead, Chris.
I talked a little bit about the persuasiveness that indeed true community can happen remotely with the right spirit of inclusion and connection and reaching out. And then we've done this long enough that there are many stories floating through the office hours community of occasions when people have been traveling and have actually met up with people they've gotten to know initially through office hours, and they've had wonderful meals and reunions, and we've seen some photographs and heard some stories about that. So it's sort of like the we are the world, we are the people. That kind of a generation of connection and co-creation that I think has made the case that better things are possible than what our circumstances deal to us. The hands that were dealt can be improved by trying new things, trying a new form of community and showing up every day. I think that's the other hallmark of office hours, is that we got smarter and better and more connected by showing up on a daily basis rather than it would have taken 30 years to reach the point that we've reached today in terms of connection and community if we had only met once a week or once a month. And it might not have even lasted long enough to achieve that. I'll stop there.
All right. Roscoe?
Wow. It's proven that life is a relay race to me, and that the baton's been passed between people. There are some incredible coaches in the background. Mickey, if I can't speak so highly of you, just the way you, even today, I hadn't been around in a while, and just the time you take, how kind you are, how much you know, and that kind of stuff. So I think it's achieved that. I know when we all got together in the desert just a little over a year ago, that was a really incredible, it's a powerful moment. In life, you meet these people virtually, and you don't know, the only thing you don't know is how tall people are. That was the most amazing thing. You suddenly run into people, oh my gosh, he's, 2 inches taller than I ever, it's just, but just the greetings, the fact that you knew everybody, and yet here you are in this barren desert. And then John, you couldn't have planned that rocket launch to go any better, because the way it didn't happen and the suspense, it's like, oh my gosh, we all got together. And then you go back out there and you go, it wasn't anything we did. We identified the problem. It wasn't ours. And then it went up, and just the thrill I think everyone had, and then searching for it. I don't know if the story's all been told about, the vehicle getting stuck and another vehicle getting that vehicle that got stuck, and then finally they got to recover the rocket. And so today, if you go to Las Vegas, you can go to a bar and see that rocket up there hanging above everyone's head. And how meaningful that was, I think, to everybody. That's a great accomplishment.
All right, Tony.
Yeah, I just want to say the idea of being able for houses of worship to remove their four walls, I think is a major accomplishment. And it may not have been, what Alex was envisioning, but the fact that there are multiple people who never come on the panel, but have gleaned from office hours how to have a worship experience where they're able to bring in and pull in people from all over the world. And I just think that is amazing.
Jeffrey?
I think the biggest accomplishment is just the fact that we can take a piece of software that was technically not meant for doing something like this and turn it into something through a group of people that are very passionate about what they're doing, and then be able to rinse and repeat that option to other areas. I mean, I watched the news last night, and I watched two people do different interviews, and they were both on Zoom, and one person was talking to an alderman or something like that, and they did the full screen, and the person was like crouched down like this, and then they had their lower thirds all over them, and it looked horrible, and then of course their name was in the corner through a Zoom call, and then I had the next interview, they pointed the camera at the phone of the Zoom call, and both of them, the audio was horrible, the video was horrible, the positioning was horrible. I've done since being on office hours, I've done many jobs, and the last job I just did was I wasn't recording people. I was just basically telling them how to position their cameras, how to change their lighting, how to make it look at least semi decent, because we couldn't give them a webcam, high-end webcam or high-end microphone to work with. So at least I could get in there and find out what they were working with and make it to the best of its ability for there. So I think it's just taking things beyond the scope of the box and just making something new out of it, which is something that I bet you there's a lot of people that have never been on office hours have taken those ideals and put it towards their daily routines, and then found that they're making lots of money simply by doing that stuff.
I'll bet so. How about Josh?
I think among the accomplishments is just having a show for over 1,000. I think over 1,000 episodes is an accomplishment in itself. Something that people are willing to do over and over again. But we've mentioned the rocket launch, the OH space, the different crazy sounding propositions that people have brought up. If they're desirable enough, people have been willing to support them. We've had started with our NAB, our NAM, Cinegear, IBC, and we did our 1,000th show commemoration, and now we're coming back around to NAB. But what it shows is, I think, that if you come up with a concept that, even though challenging, is compelling enough, people will show up, support it, and move it forward. And the fact that we're still having a show, we talk about our crew that's supporting us today. The fact that we're still coming back and supporting the show, I think is an accomplishment all in itself.
And Alex?
I think that it kind of went from us having a bunch of meetings to something that is, a lot of people are paying attention to what we're doing, and a lot of people are looking at it. And when you look at other people's Zoom events and the thing we do every day, I think we take it for granted, but it is a unique thing. And I've had a couple people, there's some people that are joining the production team soon that just were like, I just really want to figure out what's going on, like how this is working, and I think that when you look at the opportunity for someone who doesn't have a ton of technical experience to be able to go into a system and run a very professional looking show every day is a huge achievement. because it democratizes what we're doing now. The system is still like, we're still working on it and everything else, but we really want to take into account how far we've come over the last 3 years. And it would have taken a lot longer if we had met at an iteration any less than this. So every day cranking through this, and now you're going to see us adding, HDR and surround, and we're going to, last a year ago with NAB, everyone kind of cobbled things together, and we were doing the best we can, and we did, and we still did better than almost anybody else out there. This year, we're going with either 2 or 3 live views. We're going to be able to test HDR in 5.1. We've got electrosonic mics. We've got, the electrosonics are going to send us what we need there. We have all these pieces. We're going to be doing shorts and VOD and live with the panel, live without the panel, impromptu inside of after hours. It is going to be the most extensive coverage of an event, of one of these events ever, and we've got 50 people, showing, on site and off site that are putting this together. And so I think that when you look at it, the hard part for us is we're always looking at the present. Always just feels like, oh, we're just kind of figuring this out. But if we compare it to where we were 3 months, 6 months, a year ago, 2 years ago, it's dramatic. And I think that, it's going to be exciting to go another year out and be able to look back at this, because I think this year is going to be intense.
All right. Go ahead, Dave.
It accomplished one thing for me, in that my involvement in the IBC coverage says I want to go to Amsterdam.
What's our next question?
It's from Tommy Shantz in St. Paul, Minnesota. What are the top couple of things that you were able to implement from OH that made the greatest difference in your productions? The game changers that took you to another level.
Dr. Clark?
This is actually more about my role as a mentor to my daughter, Victoria, who's a professor at Arizona State in speech language pathology, and was thrown into remote teaching and had to adapt that to delivering clinical services remotely. And I was able to help her set up a home studio that took some of the best advice from office hours to paint the wall the right color behind her, for example, and to get a standing desk, or one that's could be shifted from a sitting position to a standing position, and to get a decent webcam and better audio, as everybody has mentioned. And so week by week, we added one element after another. And it turned out that her participation in meetings, as well as teaching and clinical work, became a model for her department, her unit at the university. And in fact, I think in no small measure to attribute the fact that she was just selected as the president-elect of the Arizona Association of Speech Language Pathologists, that they wouldn't have known her had it not been for her presence during the shutdown period, and the power of her presence, or the quality of her presence, had a lot to do with that. So we can kind of trace and possibly swear at office hours for getting her into a job that she probably will eventually regret, as most administrators do.
Well, congratulations to her. How about Jeffrey?
First of all, I want to go to Amsterdam too. So to me, it's been more of a stairway to heaven if you think about it. When I started with office hours, I was rebuilding a studio because there was a spot that, excuse me, that I knew that I was going to be in that can do more production, more unboxings, more videos, more interviews, and things like that. So at that time, I was building studio. We were also building at-home kits to send to people, and that was the first set of at-home kits that I ever built. But I had an idea of how I wanted to do it. But of course, that graduated after a couple of the shows that we had on office hours from there. Since then, there's just been a lot of different things that have built from when Zoom ISO came out, from when Mix Effect came out, from even when the ATEMs came out, and how that's changed different types of productions. And even today, in the last 24 hours, where I just built myself an on-stage timer, and I put that through. I'm putting it through the paces. This is the software, by the way, from the first hour they were talking about, which has just been, from what I've been playing with, has just been completely amazing, and something new that I can definitely learn, because I know that in the real world production that's going to be needed. So be able to offer a service like that is just amazing. And then, like I said, I just did a job where I was just positioning people on the camera and telling them how they look and how they sound. So it's always going to be, you get to one point and you're still learning at that point for that one thing, but then all of a sudden it's going to take you in a different direction, and then you have to take that next step, and you're going to learn a lot from it.
That's an awesome timer. Tony?
Heil PR40, ATEM Mini, M1 Mac Mini, Mac Mini, Stream Deck, AWS, audio hijack, loopback, so many different things. I can go on and on and on. But I can say that having the ICANN teleprompter for worship, for Conversation with Tony Mobley, is probably one of the biggest game changers.
Thanks, Tony. What's our next question?
Our next question comes from John Snyder himself. Thinking back before office hours, what made you become an educator, and how do you stay connected to that purpose in the midst of technological and societal change?
Roscoe?
Well, came out of college and got all my stockbrokers licenses and stuff the week of Thursday before Black Monday. So that did not look like a good career path at that moment. And I was playing around at Disneyland, and a bunch of creative people got together and were making films inside the park in the early morning hours before it opened. And a position came available at a university, and I went over and helped a gentleman who was a mentor for me. And so that's how I got into the education, kind of through the back door. I got to be able to take a hobby and turn it into a career. And it's been wonderful to do, to just, be able to give that kind of information away, to build teams, to stay connected to a changing industry. And that's the key there, is you have to be able to stay on top of things, going to trade shows, talking to people. People are, you go to a trade show and you find good resources and booths, and you get a lot of good information from those individuals. So I think that's the key, that you then as an educator get to give that information to students in a packaged way.
Great. Tony?
I don't even know where to start as far as education is concerned. When I graduated from college, I was a supply teacher or substitute teacher. I had a classroom that I was assigned to, and I did that for a year and a half every day. And then I left that and did primarily social work and case manager and different organizations, most of them nonprofits, and ended up going back to education, becoming a classroom support, and then eventually become a high school autism teacher. And that was my last job as a high school autism teacher. And I think for me, the idea of people going the extra mile to help me navigate my educational experience as a child was part of why I was always doing the kind of work that I've been able to do.
For me, myself, it was really, I've always enjoyed helping other people do their best. And usually the challenge for people doing their best is that they can't connect what they know to how they do it. And that's something that I've always been able to help explain in ways that are simple to people. So no matter where I'm at, I tend to find myself helping other people learn. Alex?
Yeah, I think that for me, I didn't really, I always felt like, and this is something I just noticed even when I was a kid, was that I loved learning and I didn't like school very much, and so that was the disparity between that of someone who is like, I literally grew up reading the entire encyclopedia, like I just started at the beginning and I'd come home and just slowly work my way all the way through the thing over about a year. And it was just, so I loved absorbing information and doing that. And I just couldn't stand school. And so I think that it was either too slow or things I didn't like, or most important, it wasn't providing me the information as fast as I wanted it. And it wasn't customizing and allowing me to do that. And so I think that I went into this mode of constantly trying to solve that problem. Like it was just me trying, every time I went into an educational position, I was just trying to figure out, how do I solve the problem of that? When I look at, to me, I almost created my next company when I closed PixelCore as B212 or B212, which is, I need a program for a B212 helicopter, from the Matrix. Like that's where we're trying to get to. We're trying to get to, I want to learn something and I can absorb a huge amount of information very, very fast, and then I can go do it. And so I was always and someone had already done that, by the way. Someone already created that company that did exactly that. So, or they're working on it. So, so I think that I'm always trying to solve the problem of how do we get people operational in what they're doing as fast as possible. And I feel like we're almost to the point where we have the tools to do it. Like and Zoom is one of those important tools. AR is an important tool. Like building documents that are full of video and audio and all these other things are part of that. GPT is part of that. All of these things are things that are going to help us accelerate how fast people learn, so that they can get to that point of proficiency faster. And I think that it's all, that's what I've been trying to solve since long before office hours.
What's our next question?
Our next one comes from Douglas Carmichael. With the tools and techniques that we're developing, Mukana, for example, and the technology available to the consumer today, is this the nail in the coffin for traditional cable access TV?
Dave?
Well, I'll start with, I'm a veteran of cable access TV. It's a very strong thing here in Canada, and it's well supported by all the cable companies, both financially and hiring people who actually train people how to make television. So having come from that, I think what we're seeing here is the transition that the internet has had on what is a push media and what is a pull media. The internet allows you to pull information toward you and decide which information you'd like to follow. In push media, they have people who have stories they want to tell and things they think you should know, and then they put it up and push it to you, and you set aside time to receive it in real time. Interactive television has always been the dream in cable access, and it's never been able to do it. But this here is not television. So you have to get out of television to do the interactive stuff.
Alex?
I don't think it's a nail in the coffin, but I think that we're probably going to outmode that. I think that a lot of what would make sense for cable access, they still have funding, is to try to figure out how to use the tools that we're using to extend what they're doing there. There's a huge value in having the resources of a cable access station, and we've used those resources in the past, and then applying them to things that are not necessarily the traditional cable access approach to sending it out to cable. But how do you build interactive events? How do you build online events using the infrastructure from the cable? You can still put it out to cable to keep that license going, but really, how do we take full advantage of the ability? We've got $1 million of equipment or $500,000 worth of equipment sitting in a room in a building in most cities that is ready to be used, and it's usually underused in that process.
Next question.
This one comes from Kenny Hempton in Greenville, Illinois. How can the Office Hours family best help the education industry vendors by providing active guidance and testing to future products and learning applications to improve learning?
Dr. Clark?
Oh, Kenny, I think your answer is embedded in your question right there. I think that the Office Hours family can continue to provide active guidance, and the reports of trials that we've done of new releases and new products and technology. But I think that our goal, or at least my goal, is to be helpful to educators. So if we're helpful to educators about steering them toward things that work or look like improvements or applications that might not have been envisioned by the users, that's helpful to educators, but it's also helpful to the vendors as well. So I think we're doing it, and I think we're going to keep doing it.
And something you can specifically do is, if you're developing a solution, have someone who's not technical, who you know, test it out and see how they respond to it. Most educators are not super technical. Next question.
Next one again from Douglas Carmichael. Alex talks about turning the dials up. As our audience grows, how can we nurture a true sense of engagement within our community and not just be a slave to the viewer count?
Roscoe?
You have to learn to laugh, and that's LAF. You have to love people, just genuinely love what we're doing here. You have to accept people wherever they're at, if they're a newbie or if they're experienced. And then there's going to be some times we're going to grade against each other, so you have to forgive. You have to forgive people and let it go on.
Well put. Alex?
Yeah, I've never been much of a slave to the viewer count. So we're going to do things that have people probably more people show up. So I'm definitely preparing people for that. But there's never going to be a time when I'm doing things just to get viewer counts, or, I don't believe in all the kind of the short-term thinking of just dumping huge amounts of people into something, or doing, what I would consider garish, pleas to try to pull people in with gotchas and headlines that pull people in and all those types of things. I think that it creates a shallow experience. So we are going to do things that are more high profile. That's going to add the number of people coming in. And we will actually probably make it more restrictive to get into Discord and harder to get into after hours as we build, as office hours starts to expand. We're going to be constantly watching that. And I view office hours as the little pointy part of an iceberg that sits above it. And after hours and the Discord and everything else is this huge iceberg that sits underwater. And we're going to keep on protecting that underwater piece as we start to build that up, because that'll keep on flowing people in, and it will have a lot of people there, and we'll have more viewers in office hours. But we're going to be very careful about how that affects the rest of that community that makes all of that work. We do need to keep growing. We do need continually to have new free thinking and new blood and everything else coming into the system. But we will make sure that it's not too much all at once. So, we'll keep on working on that. I'm not too worried about, as you've noticed, maybe I'm not too worried about view count. I'm interested in average view time and sequential attendance.
And what's our last question?
The last question of episode 1096 is from Steve Podmore in London. I'm blown away by the power and professionalism of this community. Could Alex please speak to where we see office hours going, any plans for offering the system or expertise to others, and I'm seeking to do something similar in sustainable finance.
Alex?
The system's wide open to do this now. So people could talk to us and use, I think a lot of people do other shows within office hours using their own infrastructure, but if we have people that have already worked on these things and understand how the system works, I'm open to definitely, the next step for us in the next couple of months is being able to, for instance, rebrand office hours so that it could change theoretically. We've talked about it in the past, but be able to get to a point where you could use the office hour system without the graphics, change the background, change the colors, change those types of things so that you can make that work. We're not ready for that just yet, but we will be sometime in this year, I hope, and where that could be relatively easy to switch the branding around as well. We do want more people to be able to use office hours as an infrastructure, what we're figuring out, because we'll learn a lot too. As people use it differently, we had the same thing with yesterday with iJustine. We had a whole bunch of people show up. And they did things that we didn't expect them to. And so you're going to see us constantly playing with those infrastructures to make that work. Our goal is to figure that out. Our goal is to figure out how office hours could be running and serving lots of different markets. I think that what we figured out here, to kind of close out the 3-year experiences, what we figured out here is how to have this great conversation with a lot of experts all together I think this is applicable to educators, to financiers, to bankers, to people in the cars, gardeners, cooks. Like all these things. There's all these discussions that could happen. Anything we're passionate about, we could collect people who are interested in it and have some experience, and have them answering questions to people who are also trying to figure this out as well. And so this model, I think, is applicable to millions and millions of different things. And it's one of the reasons that it's not office hours pixel or office hours video or office hours graphics, because it's just office hours, and that office hours can be applied to anything. And so you'll see us experimenting more and more this year. As you look at over the next year, we've already touched on cooking in the past. We've done those types of things. You'll see us playing more and more, both inside of our little box of video and computer graphics and audio and so on, and education, and outside of that box, where we start experimenting with singular shows and then other things that are dealing with markets that may not be traditionally what we're doing. They won't take away from what office hours is doing, but they're going to experiment with, like, can we bring, for instance, could we have a big discussion with a bunch of chefs? And they're all, or people who are really expertise in cooks that are answering questions about your rutabaga, whatever it is, whatever that is, or how to cook something, or do those types of things. And that cooking and photography and some of the other things are those are the things we're working on. So it's going to be a big year, and you'll see us focus a lot more on these events. And these events won't always be, NAB, Cinegear, possibly Infocom, possibly Pro Video in Germany, possibly IBC, SIGGRAPH. These are all things we're looking at. We're going to take what we learned at NAB and apply it to a lot of those, but we may start applying them to other conferences and other things, what we're learning, to figure this out, because I think that there's a lot of opportunity that we have. We're figuring out a lot of things very fast, faster, I will argue, than most people out there, because we can apply more people to it. And so what we're doing is helping not just respond to the future, but create it.
Thank you, Alex. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. If you are excited about where office hours is going and where we've been, it's been 3 years of highly technical people building an amazing show. And where we're going in the future is to really scale that up and make it something that other people can get involved in. And if you're interested in being involved, make sure you sign up through Office Hours Global. In the sign-up sheet, there's a daily email. You can sign up to volunteer or learn more, even if you're not a very technical person yourself. And I think Alex mentioned earlier today that there's a potential volunteer meeting next Saturday. If you really enjoyed that last question and want to hear more about introspection in office hours, make sure you join us tomorrow for the show, which is live show only. Thank you, panelists, for your time today. And for those of you who haven't seen in a while, welcome back. We are so glad to see you. Thank you, producers, for those great questions and making sure that we're able to help solve your problems, as well as give us a chance to reflect on the last 3 years. And lastly, thank you, back in crew. We couldn't do this without you. And today you stayed a little bit late. We appreciate the extra time. Our questions, if you were to travel from question asker to question hour throughout the day, you would have traveled 83,154 miles, courtesy of the Tulalak Traversal. That's equivalent to lining up 752 million bananas end to end. We encourage you to stay through the credits, and so you can see who all has been involved in our production today, and we'll see you again next week.
Just realized I forgot to eat my banana today.
I'm going to go get a banana right now. I'm going to go make a latte for my wife, and then I'm going to go buy a camera lens, because I got an FX30 but no lens. So
do they have banana lattes?
I could probably create one, but I probably would just use the syrup. I don't think I put bananas in the latte. That would be
Chat GPT. How do you make a banana latte?
Yeah, exactly. Maybe we should add Chat GPT. That would be really interesting. But I'm telling you, the script about the teenage snails, it's the future.
Our questions today were almost exactly enough bananas to fill a container ship. Whatever that's worth.
That's a lot of potassium.